very interesting guest, Joel Gilbert. And Joel Gilbert is a filmmaker, investigative journalist, political commentator, and in his film and book called Michelle Obama 2024, you may have seen it. Michelle Obama 2024, Joel does a deep dive into the life of the most popular woman in America. Here is a sample of it from Joel Gilbert. Watch this. Move all those things out of my way.
Which one? Oh, yeah, we'll move it.
They could run Michelle Obama. And if they do...
Welcome, Michelle Obama!
Michelle Obama is the most popular woman in America.
You know I hate politics.
You can forget about the disclaimer. I'm convinced that Michelle Obama is running for president in 2024.
Systemic racism, pepper spray, and rubber bullets on peaceful protesters.
It turns out Michelle was never a part of the black community.
In that household, there was fear.
You talk like a white girl.
You could get your butt kicked if you talk like a white girl.
The only person doing white flight in the 1970s was Michelle Robinson. Michelle was no victim of racism. In fact, Michelle has been running from the black community her whole life.
Hyde Park is the best neighborhood.
And Michelle sold out the black community working for the mayor of Chicago.
We're working to change the future of this nation. We need you. Are you in?
Fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
And to transform America, Michelle plans to rule America come Election Day 2024.
Amazing. That's amazing. So you believe that Michelle, welcome by the way, you believe that Michelle will be running for president?
I do, and I base that on what I saw Michelle doing once Trump got into office. Michelle started copying everything Barack had done before he ran for president. Barack had a voter registration organization called Project Vote in Chicago. That's how he got his street cred. Michelle started something called When We All Vote and got $26 million from George Soros for this voter registration group. Barack wrote 2 autobiographies, Dreams from My Father and The Audacity of Hope. Sure enough, Michelle went and wrote 2 autobiographies, Becoming, big national bestseller, and The Light We Carry. They're both also on Netflix's movies. And then, of course, Barack was the keynote speaker who introduced John Kerry at the 2004 Democrat convention. Sure enough, Michelle was the keynote speaker to introduce Joe Biden. So I'm seeing her copying all the things Barack did, keeping a very high profile. And she's very political. Just last week or so, she started talking about how afraid she is if Trump wins.
I saw that.
So I think, Michelle's the best-loved Democrat. She's the most popular person in the country, if not the world. She has a huge 100 million people on her social media. And I think she's positioned herself to take over for Biden.
And why do they love her so much when she's so evil?
Well, she got 15 years of all positive publicity since she came on the scene in 2008. The media gave her hundreds of fawning interviews, hundreds of magazine covers, fashion covers. Didn't start out so great. You might remember in 2008, she was running around the country promoting Barack's candidacy, and she was very nasty anti-American speeches.
Yeah.
You can't pay your mortgage, don't get sick in this country, you can't afford food, you can't afford childcare, very anti-American speeches. And she kind of went over the top one night and said, well, Barack won a primary, so for the first time in my life, I'm proud of my country. Now, she said a lot worse things than that, but the media picked up on that, and that's when the Obama campaign told her, look, people are paying attention to you now. We could lose. People are going to hate you like they hate Hillary. And so she took a step back and got a speechwriter the next night, and she said, I hate politics. I just want to be the mom-in-chief. So she's kind of taken a step back and pretended to be this kind of non-political person. So that's her biggest political strength. She can come on the scene and say, well, I had a great life, but I just want to bring us all back together. Remember how much you love the Obama years. We didn't have any scandals. So she is a very beloved figure because of the 15 years of all positive media coverage.
And so who love her? Is it just the blacks and the liberals? Because everybody else, Republican or conservative understand what she's about, right?
Correct, but she's a pop culture phenomenon. I mean, I was at the YouTube Theater here in Los Angeles back in December when she did this interview with Oprah that they filmed for HBO. I went 2 hours early thinking I'd just talk to a couple people and relax. I was there 2 hours early. Everyone had a ticket, but they were lined up for miles. She's so popular, she can fill up stadiums. So
really?
Yeah, oh yeah. She's appealed. If you look at her Twitter, she's been appealing to the kind of the Oprah crowd, suburban women, minorities.
Oh.
She's been working that audience for years, trying to develop that political support.
But what about that female Kamala Harris, the so-called vice president?
Yeah.
How would they skip over her? She's black. How would they skip over her and pick Michelle?
There's a couple of reasons. Number one, Kamala is not a popular person. She didn't even make it to the first primary in Iowa, 4 years ago. I don't think the black community even really considers her to be black. She's not African American. Her mother's from India. Her father's from Jamaica. And Kamala grew up in Canada. So she has no common experiences with the black community. I don't think there's very much attachment to her. And so I think just like when Hillary ran for president and Joe Biden was kind of looked over completely, I don't think anyone is going to miss or even think about Kamala Harris if Michelle says she's running for president. And I think it's going to go down in the early summer, late spring. Biden will be told not to run, or he'll say any number of excuses, health, he's got to pardon Hunter, he's being impeached by the House, he thinks the country will be better with someone else. And the way it works is, even though he has all the delegates now become irrelevant. If a candidate drops out or dies after he gets the delegates, the vote goes to the Democrat National Committee, 200 people. They're the ones that vote, and the delegates are done. So clearly they'll turn to Michelle, who has all the popularity and can raise $100 million in 2 weeks.
Does Kamala Harris know that she's not important? Does she know she's not popular, or does she think she is?
I think she's very aware, having dropped out of the Democrat election before the first primary in Iowa, and she sees the polls. She knows that she has very little public support. She really can't give a speech without sounding silly.
I know.
So I don't. I don't think she's going to complain too much.
Really?
Yeah.
But the blacks don't have sense enough to know that Kamala is not black. All they see is a black face, and they don't know how to look beyond that. And it's like the same thing with Barack Obama, the false Messiah. They thought he was black, and he's half white and black, and they just accepted him as being black.
Well, let me update you, remind you on that. When Barack came on the scene in 2008, white people thought he was black, and they were like, "Oh, a black president? That's a great idea. We support him because we would like to have a black president." But the black people weren't actually fooled. They said, "Wait a minute, this guy's from a white family. He grew up in Hawaii and Indonesia. Grew up with his white grandparents with a white mother." They did not initially accept him as one of them, and it took a lot of work from Michelle. You can watch in my movie. By the way, you go to michelleobama24.com. You can see the trailer and all the info. But it took a lot of work from Michelle going to Iowa and speaking to black audiences to try to convince black voters that Obama was even black. So it took a lot of work. And Michelle would speak to these black audiences. She'd put on a phony urban accent. If a white person did that, you'd get arrested for a hate crime. Yeah. But Michelle put on a phony accent and pretended to be kind of one of these ordinary black folks to try to get them to identify with her and with Barack.
But Hillary did the same thing. Crooked Hillary.
Yeah.
I don't feel no ways turned.
Right.
I feel like going on. Michelle, you say that Michelle pretended to be a poor black girl growing up on the south side of Chicago when it was a totally different story?
Correct. And that's what I do. I actually go to Chicago and I talk to 3 of Michelle's boyfriends, her elementary school teachers and classmates, principals, even her mother and her friends. So a completely different picture emerges. Michelle is not from the south side of Chicago. She's from South Shore, which was an middle upper class community on Lake Michigan. Jesse Jackson, also from South Shore. He never said he's from the south side. So Michelle was actually She talks about this openly, even in her book, about she was not accepted by the black kids. They considered her to be white. They called her an Oreo, which is a racial insult. It means you're black on the outside, but you're really white on the inside.
That's how I am.
And she had no...
I'm white on the inside, black on the outside.
You're an Oreo. So you know Michelle. But Michelle had no black friends, and she talked about how they would beat her up for talking white and acting white. She refused to go to schools. They had a beautiful South Shore High School 1 block from their house, all black, nice school, but it was all black. Their parents sent them to a Catholic school, her brother, even though they weren't Catholic, all white. Michelle went to a magnet school an hour and a half away. They refused to study with black kids. So Michelle Obama was the black face of white flight in the 70s. She refused to study with other blacks. But Michelle lies and tries to put together this narrative that, oh, I'm just one of these ordinary black folks. I suffered from discrimination growing up, to manipulate the black community for political support. But it's Michelle who was never part of the black community, and she was afraid of them. She even says, I got her on tape in her tour, she said she was afraid to go out of her house because they would beat her up. And I track how Michelle, in her professional career, got her revenge on the black community in Chicago, working for the mayor of Chicago. She was the assistant planning commissioner, and she kicked 20,000 black people out of the projects at Cabrini Green, made them homeless because the Democrat donor developers like Tony Rezko wanted the land near downtown to develop condos. So Michelle always filled the jobs of the white liberals. When they had a problem with black people, they couldn't hire a white person to kick 20,000 blacks out of their homes. Michelle would fill that job. As a black person, she would kick them out and say, it's going to be good for you. You're better off being homeless. Having proven she could do the dirty work, the University of Chicago Medical Center hired Michelle because they were having a problem with the Southsiders were coming to their emergency room and getting medical care and didn't have good insurance. So Michelle's job was for the Southside Health Collaborative. They hired Michelle to put them in these vans, and she would dump them back on the South Side in these crappy clinics in strip malls. And Michelle said, it's going to be good for you. It's better for you if I dump you in these crappy clinics instead of getting good health care. Michelle made hundreds of thousands of dollars exploiting the black community in her career, abusing them. But as a politician, she tries to fake this story that, oh, I'm just one of you ordinary black folks and I suffered from discrimination too. Give me the political power.
Amazing. Why is it so easy for the liberals, both black and white, to make a fool of the blacks? They should just switch roles and just tell the blacks they could be white one day and be black the next day, and the blacks just fall for it. Why are blacks so dumb?
I think they're getting smarter over time. I really do. And the worst.
Why do you think that? Go ahead.
Why do I think that? Well, I think the worst thing that they view, the black community, the worst thing for them is a sellout. When someone sells them out like Michelle Obama did. She sold them out to the white liberals to take away their homes and kick them out of their access to health care. And I think the trend has been that they're on to it. If you see the polls, Trump is trending with very strong black support, especially black males.
Yeah.
So I think it's changed over time. I don't think they're total suckers just because someone is black anymore. I think they're going to look a little deeper. Now, Michelle Obama, because she's so popular, she does achieve that for the white liberal establishment, the Democrats, because she's so popular. Oh, Michelle Obama, we love her. And she talks about nostalgia. Remember how much you loved the Obama years. So she's a great tool to trick everybody into thinking that she has their interests at heart, but she never had the interests of the black community at heart.
Yeah. I remember when they left the White House, they moved into Washington, D.C.
Right.
They put a fence around their home to protect them, but they refused to put a wall around the borders to protect the American people. They live on Martha Vineyard, in Hawaii. They're living high on the hog. But yet the blacks are still struggling, at least most of them, and they still support her. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the hypocrisy is just atrocious, especially with the Obamas. The first thing they did when they got out of the White House, they bought a home in Martha's Vineyard, the bastion of rich white liberals, and they live right there on the beach, meaning they're climate deniers. They believe that the climate change must be a hoax if you buy a house right on the ocean. So the hypocrisy is just appalling. And I think and hope, especially with this film, that when you see the real Michelle Obama, her real story as someone that exploited the black community her whole life, never had any black friends, and how she tries to fool them politically using a phony urban accent. Another thing she uses is her fashion, which we show that in the film. Michelle was actually going to the Miracle Mile in Chicago. She had all the beautiful clothes from the designers like Ikram Goldman and Maria Pinto. She had a celebrity hairdresser from age 18. So when Barack was U.S. Senator, before he ran for president, Michelle was on the international best dress list for Vanity Fair, top 25 international best dress list.
Wow.
So she's this huge fashionista. Now she shows up in 2008 on the campaign trail for Barack, and she dresses as a homeless person. She doesn't comb her hair. She wears an old sweater and tries to whatever she imagined a black housewife looked like in the South in the 50s. That's how she tries to dress, to trick people. And she doesn't say, hey, I'm another Harvard lawyer like my husband, and I buy clothes on the Miracle Mile. No, she shows up pretending to be some black housewife from some TV show she saw growing up. So she's very manipulative. She uses fashion, her speech, and these fake stories of discrimination. One of them that I expose in the film is she's been talking about for years, and she even told Gayle King the other last year. She said when she applied to Princeton, her high school counselor at her magnet school racially profiled her and said, well, you're black applying to Princeton, maybe you're stretching, quote unquote, from Michelle. I found out, she never said what color the counselor was and never gave her name. Sure enough, I found out her high school counselor was a black woman named Nan King, who was also an assistant principal, church-going woman. And there's no way she racially profiled her. The worst thing she could have said is, Michelle, your test scores are so low, you might want to apply to some backups in case Princeton you don't get accepted. That's the worst thing she could have said.
Right.
She didn't racially profile. So Michelle is all about faking a connection to the black community that she never had any connection to.
That's amazing. You know, back to Obama, you said there are blacks who recognize that he was black and white because of it, but I never heard, for the most part, blacks refer to the Father Messiah as white. They always heard that he was black, and they expected him to do something for them if he became president.
Right.
And once he did nothing for them, whatever that was they was expecting. And they got mad at him because he was black and he did nothing for the black people.
Well, they felt betrayed because that's what he sold it on. I mean,
I see.
Obama prepared for years to be in the Democrat Party and to be successful. You need to have that niche. And his niche was looking African-American, at least, was to have that core voting group. Now, he wrote his best-selling autobiography, Dreams from My Father. Now, he grew up in Indonesia and Hawaii, a biracial state where the whites are a small minority there. And for instance, in his autobiography, he tries to make it out like, similar to Michelle, that he's been some victim of discrimination to build street cred with the black community. So he says things like he was on the basketball team at high school, but the coach wouldn't let him play because he was black. Oh, that sounds terrible. Well, guess what? I talked to Obama's best friend growing up in high school, Keith Kakagawa, and he said Barack was on the team because he was relatively tall compared to the Hawaiians, but he couldn't shoot or rebound, and that's why he didn't start. So
the white side of him couldn't jump.
It couldn't jump, couldn't shoot. So Obama has used race to manipulate black voters, as you said, into thinking that he has their interests at heart. When the Obamas got in the White House, of course, Michelle went back to being a big fashionista. Obama had all whites in his cabinet. He did nothing for the black community. He brought in illegals, and he pursued this radical socialist policy that nobody voted for.
What's wrong with the blacks? They keep believing in 2024 now, they still believe that they're being discriminated against, they're being held back because of color and all that. And so whenever liberals want to win an election or something like that, they always fall back on that and tell the blacks, well, I'm going to do for you because you're being discriminated while they're just getting whatever they want in life. Why do the blacks still fall for it? I'm not getting that in 2024.
Well, it's a use of emotion. It's a use of emotion. You see Nikki Haley doing that on the Republican side.
Yes.
She says things like, the other day she said, in South Carolina, I grew up in the deep South, and every day people picked on me growing up because of the color of my skin. Now, I grew up in East Tennessee in the same era, same time frame. And in my school, there were black kids, there were Filipinos and Koreans. Nobody picked on them ever. Southerners are very respectful and very, very traditional, respectful, polite people.
Yep.
They would never have picked on Nikki Haley every day of her life. So she's looking to that narrative of creating an emotional connection through suffering. Same thing that Michelle did. My high school guidance counselor racially profiled me. I was held back in life because of my skin color. It's a way of manipulating emotion to prevent people from using common sense.
That's a very good point, man. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Are you white?
Am I white? Do I look white?
You look Jewish white.
I am Jewish white.
You Jewish?
Yeah.
And you white?
And I'm actually half Sephardic, meaning my mother's family are from Morocco and Algeria. So we have a mix of different Jewish sides.
I've said over and over again that if I was God, the only way a person can get into heaven, they will have to have visit Israel while on earth.
Okay.
If they didn't visit Israel, they couldn't get into heaven. I love Israel. I went there and I walked through the Bible, saw this amazing stuff, and I grew up wanting to go to Israel. I finally had a chance to go. It was mind-blowing. And so hopefully everybody in the world get a chance to visit. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I've been there. I have a lot of family there as well.
Are you afraid because the Jews are under attack? Does that concern you right now?
Well, I have a lot of experience in Middle East affairs. I studied this. I made 2 films about Middle East politics and Islamism. And there's certainly, I've been concerned and made a film about it some years ago, about how there's a general misunderstanding in the Western world and even in Israeli politics of the values and goals of the movement of Islamism in the Islamic world. And the misunderstanding of the goals of Islam and the values of Islam, political values, would lead to war. And that's what we saw happen in Gaza, because it was the Israeli leftist Jews in cahoots with American and European politicians that had this brilliant idea that after the PLO was defeated and kicked out of Beirut and sent to Algeria, that they would rescue the PLO and bring them into Israel, into Gaza and the West Bank, and by giving these territories to these terrorist groups, that peace would break out in the Middle East. It was a very flawed idea. And immediately war broke out, and they've been fighting skirmishes ever since, and it blew up into this huge war we have now in Gaza.
What a mess. I deviated. I'm sorry. When will Michelle, I appreciate that. I'm going to have you back with that, too.
Sure.
When will Michelle announce that she's running, if she's going to announce, you think?
I think Biden is going to go through the primary process, which will last a couple more months. And I'm thinking in May, June. Look, it could go all the way to the convention. But at some point, I think the people that put Biden, that covered up his crimes of his family and made sure he got in the White House, I think that they have enough information on him. Don't forget, he will be impeached by the House coming up. Hunter will have to be pardoned. There'll be enough terrible things going on that they'll be able to tell Biden, he's going to have to, the better of the country, not run again because Trump will win, which is what they're all saying now. They're kind of building that up. So I'm thinking in the spring or early summer, we'll see Biden drop out. And as I said, that's when the Democrat National Committee will be able to choose the nominee.
What a mess. What a mess.
That's right.
We're talking about this. Michelle Obama in 2024. We're going to tell you how to get it. It is a must-see.
Michelle, the rock of the Obama family.
That's right. It's a must-see. I'm a little surprised because I didn't think, to be honest, Michelle would run because they already have one black female in there as vice president. And I didn't think that they could skip over her because whatever. But apparently it might happen. One other thing I want to ask you about, Joel, well, more than one. But it's been said that when Obama left the White House, he left a lot of the people that worked in his administration behind, that they are still working behind there in the government. Is that true?
I believe it. I mean, he's had 8 years in office. He filled up the Department of Justice, for example. He hired 1,000 lawyers from the SPLC. He filled it up with radical attorneys. He filled up so many positions over 8 years, I think, such that when Trump got into office, he had trouble. Even if he gave a directive, an executive order, people wouldn't carry it out. So Obama spent some time doing what the radicals in the 60s, Obama's buddy, Bill Ayers from the Weather Underground.
Yeah, I remember him.
Remember him. I also show in my film, guess who Michelle's best buddy was in Chicago? It was none other than Bernadine Dorn, his wife, and also head of the Weather Underground, accused cop killer. Michelle worked with Bernadine Dorn for 2 years at the Sidley Austin law firm. And Michelle learned from Bernadine Dorn all that anti-American rhetoric we heard from her in 2008, including the politics of fear. That's what Bernadine Dorn used to talk about in the 60s. She talked about how we're all afraid of each other and all of our policies come from this fear. Sure enough, Michelle was talking about the politics of fear. So the influence that these 60s radicals had on the Obamas cannot be overstated. And so in the 60s, they always talked about, we're going to take over the country, but we have to be aware of the counter-revolution. We can take power, but they're going to come back. We have to be able to put them down. So I think Obama, what he did is he spent 8 years preparing that if they ever lost power, they'd be able to take it back. And that's how I think they look at the Trump years. They look at it as, well, there was a counter-revolution and we were able to fight it off. So that's what they're doing. Look, Michelle is very political. People don't understand how political she is. Charles Ogletree was a Harvard law professor who taught both Michelle and Barack in different years. And he said between Michelle and Barack, he would have thought it would be Michelle to run for president, not Barack.
Amazing.
Michelle's father was a precinct captain in Chicago. Her father's a politician. He had a patronage job. That's one of these cushy jobs that the Democrat elite give people to do their politics for them. He was a water inspector. So her father would show up at the water department and say, oh, that looks good. And he'd go home and do politicking. So Michelle was politicking with her father from 4 years old. She also grew up in Jesse Jackson's house. People don't know that because she was best friends with his daughter Santita. So she used to be in his house all the time when he was running for president. So Michelle started in politics about 20 years before Barack did. And that's what you learn about in my film.
Why can't, two questions about that. Number one, why do these people hate America so much? I would think that every human being in America would want to make it better, add to it, build up on the goodness of America. Why do they want to destroy it?
It's a flawed ideology. They hold America up they judge America instead of against the rest of the world. They judge America against the perfect world, the perfect utopia. I made a film called There's No Place Like Utopia some years back. And that's the socialist kind of communist ideal. They want the perfect world. And they say, well, America is not perfect, so we need to destroy it to rebuild the perfect society. So they look at middle America, for example, middle-class America that goes to church and has a couple of kids and pays their taxes. They say, well, middle America is what supports the capitalist system. It wouldn't exist without these people. So they make the middle class their enemy. They want to destroy the economy. They want to destroy families. They want to destroy everything because in their minds they want to build this perfect society that we know from history actually never works out.
Right.
When you try to save 100 million people like the Soviets did and Pol Pot and Mao, you end up murdering 100 million people.
That's amazing. I want to play something for you and get your response to before you leave here.
Sure.
This is on X, formerly known as Twitter. Tucker Carlson said February 16, 2016, that's the day Donald Trump made a blood enemy of the federal government. Watch this from CBS.
The Iraq War and your opposition to it was a sign of your good judgment. In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing.
Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East. They lied. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor
So did Donald Trump become the enemy of the federal government because he wasn't for wars?
I think
especially that one.
Well, I think that's one reason. He wasn't for open borders.
Right.
He wasn't for high taxes. I mean, all of his positions were kind of a populist position of we the people, which ran and to this day runs in contrast to the elitists and the globalists that want to do their own thing. So that's why Trump was the enemy of everyone who had those agendas in mind.
That's amazing. You know I call him the Great White Hope, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, man. I call Donald Trump the Great White Hope. Look at all my Trump stuff.
Oh, fantastic.
Let me see what he has to say today.
All right.
They say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person.
Amazing.
Well, I would say what he often says, Trump says, you know what? It's just common sense. He said, look, I'm not some huge genius. I'm just using common sense.
Yeah.
And I think that does pervade most of his policies.
Absolutely. So you supported the Great White Hope?
I am supporting Trump. I think he's the person that can, turn this stuff all around. Now, I think some of his weaknesses in the past has been he's good at firing people. I don't think he's done a great job at hiring people when he was in office.
Yeah.
I think he has to improve on that. And there's going to be a complete, if he's reelected, there's going to be the entire deep state, federal government, bureaucracy, media complex is going to fight him tooth and nail the entire time.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Biden has made such a mess of things. He's probably neutralized Trump's term if he wins because he'll have to spend several years just trying to fix what Biden did.
I know. What a mess, huh?
Yeah.
I never imagined that America would be in such a mess that it's in right now with the illegal aliens, with the division of the races. They have us more divided than any other time, and it's just a mess.
Well, this really started with Obama. I mean, Obama brought on this racial politics, I think, as a way to get power because blacks and whites were, the polls were showing about 70% when Obama was elected. 70% of both blacks and whites thought race relations were good. I grew up in the 70s in Tennessee, in East Tennessee. Black and white kids were all together. There were no racial problems whatsoever. But then Obama got into office and he started using race to divide us and to keep power. Don't forget the big event was when Obama was trying to get reelected, it wasn't really sure that the black community would come out again because things had gotten worse for them.
Right.
And that's when he picked up on the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case in Florida to inflame the black community. Obama came in and said if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And he sent Al Sharpton down there, and the whole federal government got behind this whole narrative to inflame black voters emotionally. Now, I actually made a film about that a few years ago where I investigated. I found out that the key witness, Rachel Gentel, the chubby Haitian girl that was...
Oh, that fat black girl.
Right. She was 2 years older and 200 pounds heavier than Trayvon.
Yeah.
And she said she was his girlfriend and was on the phone with him before he died. I found out that wasn't his girlfriend. That was a different girl named Diamond Eugene. And they faked that witness. That was a fake witness they used to get Zimmerman arrested, and Black Lives Matter started because of that. And it's a whole story that you can learn about called the Trayvon hoax.
What a mess.
Yeah.
I grew up in Alabama under the so-called Jim Crow laws.
Right.
Pick cotton. You ever pick cotton?
No.
You have not lived until you pick cotton. So what I plan to do is buy a plantation down there and bring all the blacks back there so I can teach them to work and be responsible and stop blaming the white man and think for themselves as individuals and not blacks.
Okay.
Don't, get away from the color thing and things will get better. But in growing up down there, black people and white people treated each other for the most part the way they would like to be treated. Yeah. The blacks were more independent. They had families. They bought land. They were free-thinking people. They didn't have some black leader over them. And I can't get past, though I understand it, I can't get past this idea of not thinking for yourself. And most blacks don't think for themselves.
Well, it's we talked about it earlier. It's the politicians, Barack and Michelle Obama, were so insecure in their blackness because both of them had no experiences with the black community. They were both rejected by the black community. Barack had no black friends growing up. His friends in college were Pakistanis. But he wanted to be in politics, and he understood he needed that core group of black voters to support him. So he would use race and racism to inflame them. Michelle Obama, ironically, has the same problem. She was never part of the black community. The kids beat her up and called her an Oreo for acting and talking white. She abused them and exploited them in her career to make money. So they're both so insecure, they both rely on using racial innuendos to try to endear themselves. Because there is this thing in the black community where if you believe that America is not racist, you're kind of not authentically black.
Yeah.
And the more you believe that whites are racist and America is racist, the more you are authentically black.
Yeah.
So to get street cred, the Obamas realized we have to claim racism, even though they were the ones, Michelle was the ones who was the most racist toward black people for her exploitation of them.
I don't believe race. I know racism does not exist. It's a battle between good and evil, right versus wrong. You're either on the side of evil or good. It's a spiritual battle. It's not racism at all. And that's one thing I want all people to understand, but especially the blacks. The word racism is just made up to deceive them. Either you're on the side of good or evil. It has nothing to do with color.
Well, I'll agree with that. I mean, just think how silly it is. I mean, here, I grew up in the 70s in East Tennessee, a small town. Black and white kids were all friends, even to this day. So the idea that because of the color of your skin that someone might like you or dislike you, at that time we believed and still believe in Martin Luther King's concept that you judge a person by the strength of their character. The idea that today, 40 years later, 50 years later, that people are talking about skin color being the defining reason to hire someone for a job or promote them or see them on TV is just absurd to us.
I was on a plane last week. I had to go to Texas. And when I got on the plane, I saw this black female pilot come out of the cockpit.
Was it United Airlines?
It was Delta.
Delta, okay.
I'm like, what the? And I'm like, I asked the flight attendant, is she a pilot?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. I'm like, isn't she affirmative action? And then I found out that there was a white male pilot in there with her.
Okay.
I felt a little better.
Well, look, the whole DEI thing has divided us because it causes us to doubt situations.
Yes.
If we didn't have DEI and you saw two black pilots, you'd feel fine.
That's right.
But because of DEI, it creates this doubt. Well, why is that person there controlling this airplane? I know especially United Airlines said that they have too many white pilots. So that tells you that they're going to recruit minorities and promote them and lower their standards in order to achieve those DEI goals. So it creates this division in society unnecessarily.
And plus, hardly a day goes by now when you don't hear of some near-miss flight airplane thing, doors falling off. Yeah. It's a mess. And so what are you to think, knowing that they're hiring these people because of their color and gender, and all of a sudden everything started going bad in the sky, what do they expect you to think?
Yeah, look, like some jobs don't matter. Like they can say, Karine Jean-Pierre, she's a black lesbian, so she qualifies for press secretary, and she can talk and she can sound silly, and it kind of doesn't matter.
Right.
Or even Kamala Harris was definitely given the vice presidential nod because of her skin color, not because she was a great politician. But when you talk about flying airplanes,
that's a whole different story.
And putting the bolt on the door to make sure the door doesn't come off in the middle of the flight, then it's very consequential.
What a mess. You see my cotton sack? Did you know there was a cotton sack?
Oh, what's that for?
Picking cotton.
Oh, no kidding. All
it's from the good old days.
No kidding.
Amazing.
Interesting.
You have never seen one, huh?
No.
Wow. I can't imagine living in America and never even seeing a cotton sack.
Never saw one.
Those are the good old days. Amazing. You know what? I've kept you longer than I know you planned or I plan to have it.
No problem.
But it's been fun. Yeah. And so tell the people how, first let me ask, you're such a good producer. Really, really amazing kind of work you do. Have you been attacked? How's that going for you?
I've had issues over the years. I'm pretty well known for a film called Dreams from My Real Father that came out with in 2012, where I made the case that Barack Obama, he was actually raised by an American communist named Frank Marshall Davis in Hawaii. And this guy was a communist ideologue. He was also a Soviet agent in the Cold War, and he raised Obama. and radicalized him. And I made the case that Frank Marshall Davis was probably Obama's real biological father. He looked just like him, and Obama looked nothing like the Kenyan Obama. So I made the case that the Kenyan Obama was just kind of a cover story for the fact that his mother had an affair with this guy that ended up raising Obama for some reason. So at that time, I remember I was attacked by, of course, MSNBC, BarackObama.com attacked me. The IRS denied all my business expenses. I had to go and get that changed back.
Wow.
So I've had a few issues. I got subpoenaed by Robert Mueller. So they don't like it when you expose what they're up to.
How do you deal with challenges like that? How do you handle things when you're attacked?
Well, in that case, I had my accountant would go and meet with the IRS and got that overturned. The subpoena from the Robert Mueller gang, I actually told them I wasn't available when they wanted me to come, and they ended up not rescheduling me, so I never actually testified.
Oh, okay.
So you just got to fight it. I mean, much as Donald Trump is doing, what are you going to do? You go and fight it and expose their corrupt cases.
Amazing. So tell the folks how to get Michelle Obama 2024.
Yeah, it's
your website
you go to
or whatever.
MichelleObama24.com. You can see the movie trailer, and it's also a book version. MichelleObama24.com, and then you can live stream and watch the movie live on SalemNow.com or Amazon Prime Video, and then you can get the DVD version or the book version on Amazon.com.
Amazing. Joel, thank you for coming in, man. I totally enjoyed talking to you.
All right.
You're a smart guy.
Well, we'll do it again.
Amazing. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks a lot.
I appreciate it.
All right.
888-775-3773. Check it out, folks. Let me know what you think. Let me hear from you about it, all right? Thank you. Let me go to the busy phones. Who is this on 3? Raj, a first-time caller out of Florida. Raj, welcome to the show. You're on the air.
Hey, thanks, Jesse. How you doing?
All is well, sir.
All is well, indeed. I called with a couple of things.
You want to listen?
Just finished the interview with the guy. But I wanted to ask, first and foremost, I've been watching you for a little over a year now, and I've heard you say some things about the deity of Jesus and maybe him not being God. So I just wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. How do you feel about Jesus and his deity, or if he is a God to you?
You said, how do I feel about Jesus, his daddy?
No, Jesus being God. How do you feel about his deity? About him being God.
What's a deity?
A deity is just a fancy nomenclature for God.
So you don't really know what it means?
No, I do know what it means. That's why I said it. That's why I used it.
So your question for me is what?
I just wanted to know. I have another question after this as well. But
okay, Jesus is the
Son. Where do you stand with Jesus? Is he God or is he not God?
He is the Son of God. There's a Father and a Son, and he is the Son, and the Father dwells in the Son.
So you don't think the Father is the Son and the Son is the Father? Because he said
how can the Father be the Son? How can the Father be the Son?
That's God's power. He could
so do you have a daddy? Do you have a father?
Of course. But
is your father the Son too?
My father is the Son, yeah.
Your father is your son?
No, I said he is a son. No, he's not my son.
He is a son, but you're the son and your father is the father, right?
Right.
So why don't
that is a logical way to say it. I understand.
Well, that's a true way to. What do you think about that?
But Jesus say out of his mouth.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. Hold on.
All right.
What do you think about that, Joel?
I think, Jesse, you're being very logical, and that's the correct idea. As you put it, they cannot be the same.
Right. How come people think the Father is the Son when Jesus even said, my Father sent me? It's not me that's doing the work, but my Father that's in me. Right. And greater work shall y'all do that I'm doing, so don't be worshiping me. But yet the people made him the God. What a mess, huh? Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.